What up, y'all? It's Joe Budden, here to talk about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to win real money while watching football. You can get up to 100 times your money.
Prize Picks will give you $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Just download the Prize Picks app and use code SPOTIFY. That's code SPOTIFY on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play a $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Must be present in certain states. Visit prizepicks.com for restrictions and details.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold! Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See detail.
Well, hello there. Welcome back for another episode of Ranching Reboot, the podcast that reboots your thinking about farming, ranching, food systems, and the people that operate them. I'm your host, Brian Alexander. You can find me on social media. Just look for Red Hills Rancher on all your favorite platforms, TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook. This week on the podcast, I've lost track of how many times my friend Hobbs Magaray and I have talked, and this week we're going to talk about selling the ranch, moving, what's next, and his upcoming book. As usual, we dive deep into the role of cattle as ecological managers and the future of cattle raising. Speaking of ecology, I know that if you're listening to this podcast, you care about the ecology and health of the environment. When you're ready to take your operation to the next level, you need to talk to the folks at Grassroots Carbon about a carbon storage agreement. Look, I know a lot of folks think carbon taxes are a scam. Some of them are, but Grassroots is the real deal. And I've been saying for a long time there's a carbon gold rush, and it's still gathering steam. You aren't going to be missing out on anything later down the road if you sign up now. In fact, you're probably missing out right now. So get in touch with Grassroots Carbon and see if a carbon storage agreement is right for you. Check the link in the show notes or go to www.grassrootscarbon.com/reboot. Again, that's www.grassrootscarbon.com/reboot, or just click the link in the show notes. That's all I got for you this week. On to the show. Hobbs, my brother, how are you?
I'm amazing. I'm amazing, Brian. How are you doing?
I'm doing quite well. Got a nice little rain shower last night, about 1 3/4 inches on the north end and here at the house, and maybe a little closer to 3/4 on the south end of the ranch. But things are looking good. Protein's starting to go, grass is starting to cure, cool season's not there, so we're about ready to start shipping out up here.
Oh, all right. That's as it should be on the northerning plains. As you get a bit norther, let's get it while the getting's good, and then hunker down for the winter, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would have liked to have had another 2, 4, 6 weeks of the grazing season, but it's just not there this year. So we're going to cut her a little bit short and be done probably by the middle of October.
And then you're going to just spend the winter skiing?
I don't know what I'm going to do this winter. I'll come see you. I mean,
no, you may not find me, my friend. We sold out all of our cows on Sunday.
Okay.
Yeah. We're having to sell the ranch because my parents got divorced, and so therefore the ranch is selling. And I'm going to be in Europe this winter, so I mean, you can come hang out with me if you want.
Okay, couple thoughts. And we can get into that however much you want to. I mean, obviously it's nothing to do with you, but more of what's next and what are you thinking about. But our daughter is actually going to be doing an a study abroad program as part of her architecture degree in Italy next year.
Ooh, cool.
And we were talking about maybe sometime like late February, early March, trying to get over there and spend 10 days or so and spend some time with her and check out Europe. And maybe It would be really cool to meet up with you while you were there and go see some stuff.
Well, I think that we're gonna be back by January. So I think that it may not overlap, but maybe we can maybe I can go park in front of in some cathedral. Maybe we can do like a sneaky podcast from inside some cathedral somewhere. That'd be fun.
Now, what are you going to Europe for?
Well, my wife's a Spaniard, so we tend to spend a lot of time over there when we can. But more directly, the food is incredible over there. The coffee is incredible over there. It's much more relaxed lifestyle, and I've been moving cows 4 times a day for the last 6 years, so my body needs a break. So I'm just gonna go bask, no pun intended.
So, how are you coping with that? How are you coping with that change going from that work and that emotional investment to not having them, or is it still not sinking in?
Oh, well, it's definitely sinking in, and I think that what I'm going to be moving on to is sort of bigger and better, and we don't have all of the exact steps laid down, but it looks like I'm likely going to be integrating even more with the Australians. I'm doing a big piece of work for them right now on the consulting side. So much of they're the only company, or the only basically the only country that has a regulated natural asset economy. So they have entire companies to which cattle can just be a part of natural asset management instead of the beef production business, and then just tacking sustainability on the beef production model. So there's that. I also am in the final process of finishing my book, which is pretty cool. It's in the beta reader stage, so it's going out to people for criticism, critique, structure, all of that. It's been a lot of fun to write.
What's it called?
It's called The Grazing Mind: How Forgetting About Beef Brings It Back to the Table.
Interesting. So what's the tagline, or what's the selling point to get people to want to go read that? Or are you still working on it?
I'm kind of still working on the log line and stuff, but the basic idea is that I really deeply explore the underlying sort of conceptual foundations. I kind of hinted at it just a second ago, which is, we have a beef production economy in the ranching world, and we're just trying to stick sustainability like on it, like just like as a just trying to retrofit it, just like bolt it on, a little afterburner or something. But
I have problems with that word.
With what?
Sustainability.
Oh yeah, of course. Sustainability, regenerative, whatever word you want to have. People basically, it's like the 737. And I think maybe we've talked about this before. The 737 airframe has been the big moneymaker for Boeing for forever. And so they just kept putting a bigger engine on it and changing where the engine was on the airframe. And that worked until the airplane started crashing. And I see that as I see the beef business basically doing the same thing right now. And the airplane is crashing. The herd numbers across the United States specifically are crashing. And so we need to totally rebuild the airframe. And in order to rebuild the airframe, we have to really look at our preconceived notions. And the basic idea of the book, actually kind of what I start with, is that, Zeitzman, one of my favorites, he says that, that cattle have a dual role, which is to efficiently turn beef into protein, and then to, the other role is to perform their duty in the ecology. And I argue in the book that actually cattle only have one role, and that is to perform their duty in the ecology. The beef part, I mean, every animal dies and then feeds something. So that's not unique to any particular species or any particular organism. So why would we use that as part of our management scheme, our management schema? So my book basically goes through my thinking on how we have to totally forget about the beef production aspect when we're building the foundations of our ranching concepts, and then we can bring it back in later after we've properly constructed our cattle world ethos.
Well, it goes back to a concept you and I have been discussing for years, like probably in our very first episode that we did together on the podcast, about grass-fed beef will become a byproduct of the carbon sequestration industry on grasslands.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And by doing that, if we get that system fully optimized, and I go into voluntary systems versus mandatory systems or conscripted systems, voluntary systems are always going to be more efficient, because the systems that have to police and enforce things will always be losing a percentage of their efficiency in enforcing outcomes. And I go through the whole savanna thing. I go through the digestive system, go through the history of grazing through, from the Pleistocene on. I go through how herd animals have appeared in indigenous folklore and mythology in this way that really highlights and outlines how herd animals activity really allowed humanity to thrive and to rise up out of the muck. And so basically those are some of the ideas of the book, is that we got to forget about beef in order to produce more of it. That herd animals, specifically mega herbivores, created the environment that humanity arose in. And so if we can really if we can reprogram, if we can adjust and reorient our neuro-linguistic programming, then suddenly we would see things in a much, much different light. So that's what my book is about. And so I'm, hopefully we can get that finished and get that out, and just keep trying to, make a difference, and then enjoy myself and work hard, and then eventually die and go feed some microbes.
Okay. I want to circle back to this regulated natural asset company concept that you brought up about management in Australia. And I think me, I spent a lot of time thinking about grasslands and who's out here and what do we have, how can we move the needle on trying to preserve more of the grasslands? And last week we went up to Kansas State Fairgrounds, met with the Kansas Secretary of Ag. There's a big group of us, like 15, 20 of us in a room. I was just lucky enough to have a seat at the table. And the Secretary Beam was asking us about, what are your concerns? What do we need to be focusing on, for Kansas grasslands? And I said, it's a people problem. It comes down to a people problem, because when we start separating ownership away from the management and production aspect of the ground, you get people that are detached from what the land represents. And it's an ownership mentality, right? Versus whereas I'm on my own property, you just recently had a property, it was the same mindset though. It's like, I'm going to be here for a while and I'm going to take care of this. It's not, I own this and have dominion over these resources. The mindset should be, I'm privileged enough to steward this resource as long as I am able. And I think that's rooted in the property rights that this country is founded on. And we can talk about alternatives. We can talk about, theorycraft, whatever you want to talk about with this, but the roots of it are in the property ownership system, and that's the stewardship of the land is a completely divorced concept from the ownership of the land.
This episode is brought to you by Coffee Mate. Coffee Mate is the world's biggest coffee lover, because we love all the ways you enjoy. Wait. Coffee Mate can't love coffee more than me. I'm a foodie. I went to Kyoto just for a nitro matcha latte. What? Oh, I have to finish the ad. Coffee Mate, for the love of coffee.
Your teen requested a ride, but this time not from you. It's through their Uber teen account. You drive your teenager around, a lot, to their friend Jacob's house, their other friend Jake's house, to James's, to Jaden's, to Jalen's, to...
Mom, this is Jake's house, not Jacob's.
Now with an Uber teen account, your teen can request a ride under your supervision. They'll ride with a highly rated driver, and with live trip tracking, you'll follow along the whole ride to their friends' houses that all sound the same. Add your teen to your Uber account today. See app for details.
Bye, Mom.
Yeah, so there is something to be said for the amount of care that you'll put into a piece of property that you are attached to, certainly. And there are advantages to that. Certainly you are aware of the tiny details to a much larger degree than people who own it and are not necessarily as emotionally or spiritually attached to the land. That being said, there are a lot of people who own land whose children are dumb, and then they can't make the business work, or they can't, or they make bad management decisions, or they refuse to adapt. I think one of the advantages of and not saying there aren't any disadvantages, but one of the advantages of a corporate system, especially. And this is not the same as like a beef corporation or a large farming corporation. If the business is dedicated to natural asset management, like that's the whole focus, then you can set up monitoring and evaluation frameworks that are helping you to make sure you're staying and meeting your goals. You also have a meritocracy there, where the smartest people in the room are generally able to scale their thinking and scale their ability to influence these landscapes. Because I mean, if you have a really great steward who has, 2,000 acres, and who is one of the greatest graziers alive, why wouldn't you want that person to be able to scale their thinking and their ability to influence landscapes over a much, broader landscape? So, I mean, I think the future is definitely going to be a mixture of both, and each is going to, and we've seen we've definitely played out the individual ownership of a piece of land part, and we will see. And it's not like these companies don't also own them. To some degree, the investors own them, but the people, as you said, it's a people problem. The people aren't directly attached to it. So we've seen that. We've seen that there are problems. I mean, it's actually really funny that you mentioned that you were talking to the Kansas State Agriculture
Secretary.
Last week, because I had a meeting with Sid Miller, the Texas version of him, a couple of weeks ago, and they love this line of where, well, farmers and ranchers are we're the original land stewards and environmentalists, and we want to take care of the land, because it's in our interest. And I said, like, well, then why aren't we growing as much grass as grew 100 years ago? Why are we losing all of our, it's like, you can say that all you want, but the data just doesn't support that. So obviously the current model is although regenerative agriculture and its various sort of semantic varieties are changing that, it doesn't necessarily support the idea that just because families have owned the land, like, it's going to improve, but every civilization that has crashed and burned up to this point has been associated with families owning land that degraded. So, maybe the corporate natural asset management model is worse, but let's find out. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Kind of like, our form of government. It's not perfect, but it's the least worst thing that we've managed to come up with so far.
That's right, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. Who knows? It could just be a global play for control. It could be completely taken over by nefarious bureaucrats it might, but but basically it's the human experiment still um, tumbling around trying to figure out the best way to do things. And so I'm enthused to see how that plays out, and if it's scalable, and if it begins to spread. So we'll find out. It'll be interesting to watch.
Okay. How I want to talk about like the politics of green grazing or regenerative grazing, whatever. Let's just say whatever the incoming administration wants to brand it as and their agriculture policy. How much pushback do you think there's going to be from either side, or especially from like, I don't know what I'm trying to ask, but I feel like if Kamala gets elected and has X environmental policy for farmers and she tries to implement it, it'll get universal hatred. But if Trump had the exact same policy, it would get acceptance.
Yeah, there's never been a more tribal time, obviously in my lifetime, but I'm not that old. I'm nearing 40. I'm turning 38 at the end of this month. But I think, one of the things that you and I have talked about, and one of the things that you're not supposed to talk about, is that the average person doesn't have the capacity for it. Here's what I would say. I would say that almost every single person overestimates, let's just say everybody overestimates their ability, the degree to which they come up with their own thoughts originally. We all like to think, I made that decision and I thought it through and these are my beliefs and yada, yada, yada. When, a huge, huge amount of what we think we just basically adopted from somewhere else. And it just so happens to align with this tribe of other people that I'm involved with. And then people inevitably say something like, I just don't understand how people can't think for themselves. And people who say that generally, I think give themselves way too much credit for thinking for themselves. So it's not necessarily the thinking. I think very, very few people have ever come up with original ideas in the history of humanity. So we just need to focus on our filtering, our ability to filter the information that comes in. Hopefully we get a nice variety of information that comes in and can filter the stuff that actually works. I think it's part of a larger problem that you and I have been discussing for the last, 4 years now, which is that regardless of who comes in and what their policy is, it's just rearranging deck chairs on some sort of massively changing. I mean, I don't want to say that it's going to crash and burn, but we are definitely on the precipice of some massive changes, and I think that that's part of the whole illusion that's happening right now, is that everything's just going to continue kind of just making small changes, and it does in 80-year increments. Then every 80 to 100 years everything just goes and that's kind of where we are right now. I think that the green policies, RFK Jr. obviously is promoting management intensive grazing on Twitter.
Yep.
I think that his side of the I think the RFK Jr. led, and this is kind of why I was actually brought in to talk to Sid Miller, because I know he was having some meetings with RFK Jr. and it's like, okay, you're a multiple time world champion roper, and RFK Jr. is an environmental lawyer. Like, how are we going to build bridges between you guys? And it's ultimately that, ranchers and farmers have the biggest opportunity to be environmental stewards. That's obviously and then how you get into that is really you get into the nitty gritty of the details. But your initial question is, how are people going to respond to things? I don't think that Kamala Harris would really be pushing any of the more regenerative policies. I think that her world is more in line with we got to increase the efficiency of feedlots type of thinking. I think that this more scientific, materialist, we have to, every problem we have to fix with the medicine, or every problem we have to fix with some sort of technology or fuel input or whatever. I think that right now there's this very, very strange thing happening in the Republican movement, where it's suddenly adopted this sort of neo-spiritual bent to it. I mean,
suddenly Republicans care about the environment.
Yeah, it's bizarre, and it's because I think we've entered this weird like archetypal stage, and one of the things that I write about a lot in my book is, and I'm always been a big fan of is archetypes. And I can see how ancient cultures, and even not so ancient cultures, view this world as an unfolding story, not a bunch of atoms bumping up against each other. It's this unfolding story that goes in patterns. And when you have a guy like Trump get shot in the ear, and he goes down one man, and is sort of, from an archetypal standpoint, is sort of blood anointed to become this leader. So he stood back up a different person from an archetypal standpoint. And that's, I mean, you could think about it from like every movie you've ever seen. Like that would be a massive transformational moment in the movie. And
yeah, I totally get it.
And then so suddenly it's the Republican movement has this more spiritual element to it that's happening right now, that I'm really, and that's why I think that it's allowed the likes of Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. and Elon Musk to join, because it's become this transcendent movement, whereas the Democrats are still kind of stuck on the same old thing that they've kind of just been slowly making tweaks to for a long time. I mean, 70% of the Democrats and Republicans, let's just say they're half and half in the United States. Democrats control 70% of the wealth. Republicans control 30% of the wealth. And so, in a sense, the Republicans are the party of, well, let's tear this shit down because this is not serving us. We're not getting our share of the pie. The Democrats are like, well, let's keep things going the way they are because we got all the money. Things are working out great for us. So Trump is the party of let's tear stuff down, and Kamala Harris represents the body of people who want to continue things as they are. Obviously, that is the world of as they call it, the rules-based international order, also known as, you can also refer to them as the globalists or the unelected bureaucracy or whatever.
Deep state, swamp.
The deep state, yeah, all running things. And they are doing everything that they can, as you would expect them to try to prevent this sort of transcendent movement from having any sort of momentum, and I don't think they're having much luck. I think Trump has a really great chance of winning in November, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
You showed me a lot of interesting rabbits to go chase, and I'm a libertarian and have been for a long time. And I hate to say this, but I'm probably going to be voting for Trump, even though I'm in Kansas and it doesn't really matter. I don't like him. He's a buffoon. I don't like how he talks. But looking at the alternative, like, do we want to keep going down this path of where the Democrats and the globalists have us? No, I don't think so. Do we want to change it to something better? I think that's the goal. You said something that kind of really struck me about there's the side that wants to keep the system going and perpetuate the system because they're benefiting from it. They're basically in charge and almost at this point, it seems like immune from prosecution, to the side that wants to tear it all down. And if there is a coming struggle in this country, and you know what I'm talking about, that's the two sides that it's going to be. You're either going to be fighting to tear it down, or you're going to be fighting to keep it. And I think it's also important to note that part of burning it to the ground and building something new is after they line up the lawyers, generally they go burn the property records office because well, think about it. If you don't reset the property record, you didn't change anything.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. Let me think about that. I mean, there definitely are all kinds of historical precedents for that. Um, and there are a lot of historical precedents where that goes bad. Zimbabwe is a great example of that.
There's not many examples where it goes good and bloodless.
Right, exactly. I'm definitely thinking, and it actually ties into another thing that I've been thinking about lately. Have you ever seen that meme where it's talking about how um it's talking about the electoral college versus the popular vote, and it's, they show you this giant map that's completely red with a few blue dots, and the idea of the meme is that it's because people vote, not land, and I thought about that, and suddenly it dawned on me that actually the reason the electoral college, and this goes back to your ownership and involvement with the land, the reason the electoral college is a good idea is because the land actually does vote. And it votes through the people who have control over larger portions of land and are given a disproportionate voting power through the electoral college system. Because what's the value of another person's opinion from the next neighborhood in Los Angeles? It's that person has the same experience that in life, basically, that the person next to him has. But you, for instance, and your neighboring rancher, you like that land needs a voice and policy, the American policy needs to have its voice affected disproportionately by what the land is telling you and by what the natural world is offering to you in terms of information. And so in a sense, I think that's one of the I've never really heard that brought up, but I think that's one of the brilliant aspects of the electoral college system is that it does actually allow the opportunity for the land to vote. And that's a pretty cool idea.
But I think where it's broken down is we have so many absentee landowners now.
That's definitely a problem.
When that system was put in place, granted, we're dealing with a system that's 250 years old. They weren't perfect. They did the best they could and came up with the least worst form of government to date. But they couldn't have foreseen that, people would want to be 5, 6, 7, 8 or 5, 6 generations removed from the land and still maintain ownership. Like that wasn't a scenario. So, back to this thing about management being divorced from ownership, and overall, I think about this on the county level. So just in my county, my dad sat down and went through the plat book. Like, it's not like he has a lot better to do sometimes than go through the plat book and, get his calculator out, add up acreage of everybody and figure out where they live. He figured that roughly 40% of our county is owned by absentee landowners. And when you count people that don't live on the land but have moved to town and still are in the community, like same voting area, voting district, that number goes up to over almost 65%. So the amount of people that are actually living on land that they own and manage, I think it's the lowest it's ever been. And it's a trend that doesn't reverse until the system changes, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the hope that maybe we have for that is the possibility of decentralized energy. I think that the rural world will have a total renaissance when energy becomes decentralized. If we can suddenly have microgrids or an adequate amount of energy that's produced without having to be on a giant extension cable, Then I think, and centralized power plants, I think that we're going to have a complete and total renaissance of rural areas, and people are going to figure out that, oh, actually, it's quite nice to be out there.
I feel like you have a picture in your mind that you're talking about. Can you describe it to me?
Well, yeah, I think that I think we'll see more small communities out kind of in the boonies, and because you'll get access to, you have plenty of access to any information that you want, any entertainment that you want. You will have the ability to, I mean, and there are probably going to be a lot of people who still continue to want to live in town, and that's fine. But I think that there is a huge percentage of people who still live in town who would love the opportunity to have the benefits of.
It seems like they all want to live in a small town with big city conveniences and entertainment and shopping.
Yeah, I think that I think maybe that's the rub for me, is the whole shopping aspect. It's like shopping as a recreation is just something I've never really been interested in, and it's something I don't understand, so I probably can't really comment on it. But think about, you're in Sun City. Is that the closest place to you?
Yeah,
Sun City. What's the population?
45.
Right. Okay. Well, good.
Not 4,500.
Right, just 45.
4 or 5.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, the town where my family has been up until about 10 years ago was Vega, Texas, population 800 or almost 900 or something, and little towns like that I think can have a real resurgence, and I think satellite internet is going to be a big game changer for that. I think it already is. I was reading this book called In a Sunburned Country about Australia, and they were talking about the radio schools. So these kids would have to go to school on UHF, ultra high frequency radio, where they would tune in for like 20 minutes a week, and if they were lucky and had a good signal, they can catch the lesson for what they're supposed to do for the week, and then they would go back to work on the sheep station, or whatever. And so I think the access that we have to information, the access we have to entertainment, to education, I think is going to lead to a total rural renaissance. And I think also access to, if we can really pull off the whole electric equipment and electric implements, electric lawnmowers, stuff that just parks itself and then does what you want it to do. I think that if that tech really takes off, that's going to be a huge rural boon, because the quality of life will improve, because we won't have to spend all of your time mowing stuff and planting stuff. And if we can automate that, I think that'll be huge. And I think there's a good chance in the next century we'll be able to automate a lot of that.
Why aren't we advocating for all these new rural landowners to be mowing their lawns with sheep and planting food forests instead of green grass?
Hey man, I'm totally with that. I think that that's a reflection of and I think that's a reflection of the savanna environment that we all want, that we all desire. That's a big part of the lecture series that I give. That's another thing that a shameless plug is, I have a live lecture that I've done in Australia and in Europe and a bunch of places in the United States, and I'm calling it the herd effect, how grazing animals built the modern world. So that's the name of the lecture. And it's, you look around you, the basic idea is that the herds built the savannah built humanity, and we create that all around us without even knowing it. And so that's the basic idea of the lecture. And then how that should inform our land management moving forward, and the idea that, we invented agriculture not because it was some great forward step, but because we had a massive 1,400-year period of death, destruction, darkness, and cold temperatures, and we had to figure out a way to not die. Where previous to that, we had 2.6 million years of explosive brain growth. Must have been pretty good. So So we should be really working to recreate that natural savanna that used to be just, prolific across the entire world. So that's basically the idea of my lecture series. October 1st, that's going live at 12 noon Central. It's $19. I can actually send you a link that you can add somewhere if that's a thing you do.
Yeah. Send me a link we'll put it in the show notes.
What now?
Send me a link and we'll put it in the show notes.
Okay, cool. That'd be great. Yeah,
because this comes out next Monday, so I have like a week, 10 days to look at it. Get signed up.
Great. Yeah. So that's really the direction that I'm headed in my world right now, is that I'm moving away from the day-to-day management and into the how can I use my brain to scale what we're doing right now. I've basically done my PhD over the last 6 years in I've got literal boot camp, you could call it. I think that there's always a ton more to learn, but I'm at a place, given my particular personality and my particular set of skills. I think I'm in a place where I can use my brain to create systems that scale, and that's kind of where we're at the moment. And interestingly enough, that pays really well, so I'm going to keep doing that because my family deserves to have an ever increasing quality of life if I can give it to them as well. That's for sure.
So you mentioned possibly going to Australia earlier when you kind of talked about what's next. Do you think that there's a higher probability? That's not the right word. Do you think going to Australia is a better way to affect more acres that are in one area rather than trying to do piecemeal?
Oh, for sure. So the company that I'm working for right now, that I'm basically designing systems for them to, integrate a more ecologically focused way of doing things. They control just over 3 million acres currently, and they're going to be adding more as they move forward. So yeah, I'm not moving cows 4 times a day, which I love, which I adore, and I have just very much enjoyed it. And it was very sad for me to see all my cattle go. But at the same time, if I can make changes that affect a much larger part of the planet, then it's my responsibility to do that. So that's the direction we're heading. There are a lot of things to work out still, but for the time being, I'm doing a lot of consulting work for them, and it's been great. The Australian companies are really amazing to work with because they're just such a back people, and they're much more progressively minded in some areas to their detriment, but most areas the progressive minded aspect that the Australians have is just really lovely, and openness to new ideas. They have the same number of cattle the United States does, and 10% of the population of people. So it's a lot more of it's a much more pastoral culture, So I've just really been enjoying working with them, and I hope that what we end up doing over there is something that can continue to scale over here. And I know a lot of great people are doing a lot of amazing work here in the United States too. So it's not like you guys really need me that much. So no, it's good, and the future is bright. And you know what? I who knows? I may end up, I doubt it, but I may end up running a skid steer at a feedlot. But that's where I was born, on a feedlot, so wouldn't from the dust we rise, and to the dust we return. So
you got to do what keeps food on the table.
That's right.
Wow, I just kind of drew a total blank about where to go next. Cow herd.
Well, one thing we could talk about, cow herd numbers in terms of what?
Okay.
Oh, cow herd numbers.
I remember saying this 2, 3, 4 years ago, maybe, about that during this cattle cycle and during this drought, there's going to be a lot of cows that go to town. A lot of high input type cows go to town. And I said this at the time. And I can only hope that when those ranchers start to restock, they start to build smaller, more forage efficient herds. And I think where we are is the point where guys are still where we're at a kind of a critical point, I think, in our cow herd numbers. And what do you see? How do you feel about where the cow herd numbers are and where we need to go in order to maintain production?
I think the cow herd numbers are in terminal decline. I think that at this point, if you think about it logistically, how do you start growing those numbers again? There are basically only two ways to do it. Number one is you have to decrease the age of first calving, and that can basically give you maybe one extra year. And that's only in basically the South where you're running, on poor forages. Everywhere, basically panhandle of Texas and north is already calving all their heifers at 2 years anyway. That's just the way it is. When you get higher in higher latitude and higher elevation, you have hot forages and you have early sexually maturing, typically British beef cattle. Great. So you can't really add any numbers by making them calve earlier. So there may be 50%, let's say 50% of the American cattle herd, you can get one extra calf by really focusing on early sexual maturity in maybe Bos indicus type animals or more corriente type animals. But then the other aspect where we're really going to need to be adding animals is longevity. If we can increase longevity of the individual cow, then they will produce more cattle over their lifetime, and then we can start to expand the herd. But then the question becomes, do people's financial models support that? Are they going to be able to hold animals? Are they going to be able to afford to hold animals? Are they going to have to sell them? Is the consumer going to tolerate the higher price that comes from ranchers holding animals back? And so decreasing the supply of beef and increasing the cost of beef to the consumer. So there are a lot of logistical and supply chain and genetic constraints to actually growing the cow herd. And maybe you saw this, but I overlaid a cow herd population chart with oil production in the United States, and it's a completely correlated chart. So the cow herd in the United States is a derivative, just an almost direct derivative of fossil fuel affordability and production. So the real question is, which ties back to what you're saying, are we successfully transitioning from that fossil energy-based model to the photosynthesis-based model that Mother Nature runs on naturally? And if we can transition, and this is why my book is about, we have a lot of stuff we need to throw out. We got to do the Elon Musk with a lot of stuff we're doing with cattle. One of the things that he says is if you're not adding at least 10% of the stuff that you threw out back in, you're not throwing out enough. So we need to take this entire industry and just chuck stuff out. Big cattle, we got to chuck them out. High input cattle, we got to chuck them out. Feed conversion efficiency, we got to get rid of that. It's a bad metric. We got to lose that. And that's a big one that's very difficult for people to get their head around. And the idea, the one of the things I write about in the book, and I think is an appropriate metaphor, is that if you're driving down the highway, the most fuel efficient car is like a little 4-cylinder, right? The basic idea is that by measuring for conversion efficiency, we're creating effective cattle in general, and that's that goes back to the whole make feedlots more efficient because it's better for the environment kind of thing, instead of looking at how Mother Nature does it. And then that goes right back to your idea of what are we going to do, or your subject matter of what are we going to do about cow herd numbers. We have to have a massive paradigm shift. We can't. That's the other thing I was talking to Sid Miller about, is like the only way that the ranching industry is going to survive is if we stop thinking about ourselves as beef producers and start thinking about ourselves as basically ecological maintenance engineers, and then who just produce beef as a waste product. Like it's a highly monetizable waste product. And you and I have had this discussion for years now, but it's just not like we have to let go of the identity of the beef producer. Like it's counterproductive at this point.
But that's so core to so many people's identity and personality that's going to be really hard to give up.
Yeah, well, being a follower is really core to a lemming's personality, but doesn't always really work out that well for them. So it's a time of great introspection for the ranching industry. I mean, for humanity at large. I mean, the way that we interact with Mother Nature, the way that we act with reality itself, I don't think very many people have figured that out. I don't think very many people are doing that well. Like, our job is to create as much life per square meter as possible, to create as well of functioning cycles per square meter, per cubic meter as possible. That's our job. If you do that well, you make more beef. If you do that well, you make more money. If you do that well, you have a happier life. So it's about getting back to the basics, or to put it in a more philosophical way, it's about examining our axiomatic presuppositions. And that's okay. This is what I go after in the book. I'm like, okay, if we're going to look at the foundations of our thought, like, let's look at all the way to the bottom. First thing to think about: the world exists. Either you say it doesn't or it does. Like, that's the most basic thing that we can agree on. Okay, the world exists. Let's agree that the world exists. And then, so that can be the basic idea. And I build up about 5 or 6 steps, and to the point where I start talking about the natural world. And then basically 6 to 10 are these axiomatic presuppositions that reorient sort of the way that we look at things. And if we agree that we can start from the world exists, and the goal is to stack the next Lego block in the strongest way, to put more Lego blocks on top of conceptual abstractions, of conceptual principles, then we'll have a much better overall outcome. And my thesis is, beef production doesn't have a role at all in that set of axiomatic presuppositions, or that set of principles. It's just something that spills off the roof. So we have made it so core to the foundation of the house, beef production, that we end up with all of these messed up systems. Another really simple way to put it is that we're so focused on the outcome that we've lost the process. We have totally, and the regenerative or sustainable movement is definitely changing that. But are we just putting a new roof on the house, when the foundation is rotten? Or are we going to go all the way down and rebuild the foundation, fix the cracks in the foundation, rebuild the basement, rebuild the floor, all the way to the top? And suddenly, who we are and what it means to be a steward of the land and a rancher looks completely different. And I think that's, I made a case for that in the book, and I'm really working hard right now on making the book more accessible. It's a little bit heady at times, and I think that might be one of the things that I'm struggling with the most, and the things that I'm trying to correct and make it more readable. But it's really easy just to say that, man, the foundation is rotten, and we can't window dress the industry right now, because it's just, I mean, for instance, I was at the Texas A&M beef short course a couple of months ago, and maybe 1 month ago, and for their tech seminar, their beef tech seminar, and it was 100% how we can make feedlots more efficient. Like, that was it. How we can use AI and advanced censoring mechanisms to make feedlots more efficient. How we can make a totally unnatural system more efficient. Like that's missing the point. I mean, yeah, feedlots are a reality, and they're going to be with us for a while longer, until we can turn the planet into an optimized grazing system, which is kind of my life's goal, is to move the planet towards an optimized grazing system, because that's largely what it was during the Pleistocene. But the engineers, the well-paid engineers, have figured out how to most effectively deploy energy to defy nature. And so that's where we're putting all of our energy, instead of how can we enhance Mother Nature. Like, What if it's possible that we could actually make Mother Nature function better than it ever has been as a result of our conscious manipulation? I think we should, instead of just how we can, it's like we found gas and now we're like, ooh, I push this button and meat comes out. Like that's in a sense what a feedlot is. Like I push a button and meat comes out. And that's not how natural systems work. Natural systems nothing can be separated from anything else in a natural system. And our current system is defined by materialist mechanical separation. And there is definitely a bit of a spiritual undertone to what I'm talking about and to my book as well. But that's just that's my particular brand.
Spiritual, but not religious.
I mean, not really. I mean, it's I guess religious just sort of becomes dogmatic and spiritual and religious built on the semantic superstructure. Like when someone says, do you believe in God? And it's like, well, all we're doing is bandying about words. Like, well, how do you even know that we're talking about the same thing? Like,
well, let's talk about what you mean by God.
Right, exactly. But then to say, like, do I live my life as if there's a father figure in the sky waiting to punish me if I screw up bad enough? Yeah, like I definitely do live my life that way. So in a sense, my actions seem to indicate that I am definitely a structural. I'm structurally, I definitely believe in God. So I mean, it's the religious is the semantic superstructure, and spiritual is maybe your individual relationship with how you act towards the world. Like, do I act as if the person who takes on the maximum amount of suffering for the betterment of humankind is the savior of the human race? Like, yeah, that's a great model. And I act like that. And whoever is in that shining beacon of excellence is who I'm going to give my allegiance to, Does that mean I'm going to go around using all of the same language that Southern Baptists do? Like, no. But structurally, I would have to say that's so there's definitely a spiritual component and a religious component, but which one? What is the semantic? What do the semantics mean? One thing I do certainly believe in and act as it, and try my best to act from is that all things are one thing. It's like everything is so inherently interpenetrated that it's not even useful to talk about things connected. Like that's one of the things that my wife and I argue about, is that the second you say that two things are connected, you created a world where they're actually not. There are two things, so they're not connected. Like it's obviously this is just semantics as well, but it matters, because when you get married, do you say, all right, you are now a more connected two flesh bodies? No, you're now one flesh when you get married. So like that matters, and that there's a deeper level of inseparability that the humanity, and particularly ranchers, have to start grappling with if we're going to shift to a different paradigm that's actually going to last and be iterative. So yeah, that's a little bit woo-woo, maybe a little bit more Zen than most people are super comfortable with, but I am a huge...
This episode is brought to you by Atlassian. Atlassian makes the team collaboration software that powers enterprise businesses around the world, including over 80% of the Fortune 500. With Atlassian's AI-powered software like Jira, Confluence, and Loom, you'll have more time to do the work that matters. In fact, Atlassian customers experience a 25% reduction in project duration per year. Unleash the potential of your team at Atlassian.com. Atlassian.
Hey Realtors, on your way to a listing presentation, Zillow Showcase helps you stand out with sellers by putting their listing and your brand in the spotlight on Zillow. With Zillow Showcase, your listings can get prioritized placement, astonishing performance, and exclusivity. Showcase is designed to not exceed 10% of listings in a market. Don't wait to give your business the premium marketing and branding treatment it deserves. Visit showingtimeplus.com/Spotify to get started with Zillow Showcase.
The more we conceptualize the absolute unity of all things, the better off that we'll be. Because I mean, most of our systems are built on this idea of separation, and there is the reality of separation. Like if you want to look at it from a for instance, like a Buddhist standpoint, you have a coin. One side of the coin is that all things are one thing. The other side of the coin is that things are separate. And the point is not to be on either side of the coin, it's to have the coin. The coin is the wholeness of reality, because it contains separateness and unity. And the truth of the matter is neither and both neither and both. You know, it's so but my biggest problem is that we live on the separate side of the coin. Particularly in this culture, we live on the side of the coin that everything is separate. And we don't see you look out, you see a piece of grass and you don't immediately think, oh, that's me, but it absolutely is. You know, that cow, that's me. It absolutely is me. It's all one. So I think we would do well to spend a little bit more time in that frame of mind. And I think it would definitely aid our transition into a more sustainable paradigm.
Okay.
Brian, you don't have me on you don't have me on this podcast because you think that I'm going to say something boring.
Oh no, I'm getting ready to say something here. You've mentioned reality several times, and reality is something that, you know, for some reason or another, I spend a fair amount of time thinking about. So I'll give you a choice of three. We're alone in the universe. There's a multiverse, or simulation theory.
I think I find it most functional to think about it from a simulation. You know, think about it like this. A lot of people.
Before you go,
No,
I'm going to say
I
don't think we're living in a simulation, and after you finish, I'll say why.
Okay, very cool. I'm looking forward to hearing this. I'm not, but the thing is, I think it's functional to think about it as a simulation, but to think there's something outside the simulation, like, I don't know. Here's how I can conceptualize existence or reality. You know, like in Men in Black, where they keep zooming out and eventually the universe becomes an atom.
Yes.
You know, and then people think it goes infinitely down or infinitely up. Here's how I actually conceptualize it. Imagine that the desk you're sitting in front, there's an atom. And you go into that atom, and it's a universe, and that universe has or galaxies, and then galaxies have solar systems, and on that solar system there's a planet, and on that planet there are continents, and those continents have countries with cities, and cities that have houses, and houses that have furniture, and on that in the house with furniture there's a desk, and on that desk is the exact same atom that you started with. It's a loop. So I don't think it's infinitely up or infinitely down. I conceptualize it as this strange loop where you end up right back where you are.
Okay, that's interesting. I'll have to give that some thought and some study. From my perspective, I don't think we're living in a simulation. Because from a system designer point of view, you would cram as many people as you could into a small of an area, so you only had to render the structures. Like, you could render the structure once for 10,000 people, right? Versus where I live out here on the Great Plains. I think the Great Plains and how sparsely populated they are disprove simulation theory, because it would be an irresponsible waste of resources to render this entire environment for just me or just my neighbor that's 3 miles over the hill. And we're the only people out here. That's pretty wasteful of resources. Like the amount of computing, compute resources it would take to render the hills and the grass and the wind and the sky for just me in the area that I occupy without anybody else, that's incredibly wasteful from a systems resource point of view.
Oh, so you think that the cattle out in the pasture that you can't see right now are currently being rendered?
No, I think they actually exist. Like, I don't think we live in a simulation.
See, I mean, I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure that anything that I'm not seeing right now is currently being rendered. My connection is unstable, so I may be outside of your rendering in a second, but we'll see. I mean, it's like you see somebody up in an airplane and you're like, are there really people in that airplane that are having an experience right now? You know,
is there somebody in that airplane that's looking down at me right now wondering, is there really anybody down there?
Right, absolutely. And I don't know. That's I'm not sure. And is that person a different person? If there is a person up there, is that person a different person from me right now? You know, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. All I know is that, I mean, and you know, we go any farther and we end up in the, well, what does any of this matter anyway? But and that's definitely a legitimate question. Because I have to, regardless of whether it does or not, people don't like it when you pretend like they don't exist. So functionally, I think that it's probably a good idea to just set up our rules like that it does, you know. So I, you know, that's a I mean, that's the question people have been exploring for forever. You know, and to your idea that, you know, the land is being rendered, I completely that you don't agree with this, but I think you do. That I think the land has an intelligence of its. I think that I think the grass and the animals obviously have an intelligence of their own. You know, I more to a piece of ground responding to really great grazing strategies than just, oh, we have now put in the proper mechanical and chemical processes that will enable this to work at its maximal function. I think there's a consciousness that arises when it is properly oriented with the rest of reality. I think that I think it wakes up to some degree. I think we humans have depressed a naturally occurring landscape consciousness that was probably once so strong that it spoke to our ancestors in a way that it just doesn't speak to us anymore.
You think all the noise from technology drowns out that signal?
I think noise from technology. I think that's a big part of it. I think just our domestication of ourselves has been a big part of it. I think I think that the degradation of the land, treating the land as a resource to be mined instead of an extension of ourselves, has cut off that connection with the land. I think over urbanization has cut off that connection with the land. As you say, you know, people who live in town or removed from the land 4, 5, 6, 7 generations, you lose that ability. Like I was reading this book called, what was it? Songlines. It's this book called Songlines by Bruce Wynn, and talking about the Aboriginals. And they have what are called song lines. Like their migration patterns, the way they do territory is not like a property boundary. It's like a migration route. Like that goes across, like that's how they do territory. All these different tribes have these different lines. And they can sing the lines, and the way that they sing it is corresponding with the geography, and also is telling a story about what they call the dream time, which is the ancestors that are anthropomorphized kind of gods that created all of the structures. So like, so when they point at a landscape, you don't go, what is that? You say, who is that? because that landscape is an anthropomorphized, god that's now sleeping there or something like that, or there are eggs there, or there's always a big story. But the thing is, an individual Aboriginal person might only ever go 100 or 200 miles up the song line, but they can sing the entire song line from coast to coast, and it's passed down to them. They have this genetic ability that's passed down from them. And if you go all the way to the end of the song line and play a few bars of somebody who was singing on the total opposite end of the song line, they will know the entire song, although the words will be different because they speak different Aboriginal languages. So there's this bizarre thing that's happening, or maybe not anymore because the numbers of Aboriginals are decreased so much and they become more westernized. But there's this bizarre thing that's not explainable really through just like, here, memorize this, and they have a different relationship with the land that has some like a strange genetic or spiritual arising or emergence that's difficult. You may also know that Aboriginal people will never draw a map with the one direction north. No matter where they're standing, it'll always be oriented exactly as they are. So if they're pointed south, they will draw the map as it's south. They have it's almost like birds that have navigational abilities programmed into their genes that these Aboriginal people have. And we're talking about losing a connection with the land. And I think that over hundreds of years, we have lost that connection with our land. One example that I've always known from a little kid is like, oh, I can feel the magnetic field of a group of cows. And I know there are a lot of ranchers out there, especially ranchers who have been doing this or many generations deep into it. Like, you can feel the magnetic field of a group of cows. You can feel where they want to go, where they're pushing on you, where they need to go, the way you step will interact with them. The way that your magnetic field will interact with their magnetic field. There are a lot of people who are going to know what I'm talking about, even if they've never really thought about it in those terms.
Yep.
And that's another example of that. Like, I know people who've been living in the city for 7, 8 generations. They're going to have no ability to do that. And I think that there are probably countless examples of that, about being united with the land and receiving that intelligence in some sort of way that we are losing day in and day out, especially as our technological sense rises. So I guess maybe one of the ultimate questions that we have to deal with is, how do we have a resurgence in spiritual wisdom while not losing all of the benefits of technological advancement? It's a big topic. It's definitely a big topic.
I'm really excited for you to take a trip down to Australia and go spend some time with some Aboriginals, like out in the bush, and learn from about the land, and maybe not necessarily management, but just like absorb some of their cultural knowledge, because that sounds very interesting about the song lines. I've never heard that. We do need to get out of here. That's kind of the price of starting late, is we still have to kind of wrap up on time. Plug your book, plug your lecture. What else do you want to leave us with, and take us out?
Well, the book, yeah, okay. So the first is the lecture, October 1st, 12 p.m. It's The Herd Effect: How Grazing Animals Built the Modern World. It's going to be live online. I've given this lecture in person a bunch of times, but it always continues to change and evolve. And you'll have access to it after you're done. $19. Should be really cool.
If I sign up for that, like, can I heckle you with questions? Is there like a Q&A?
Yeah, there's a Q&A at the end. Yeah, absolutely. So heckling is welcome. Please save your heckling for the end, of course, but
okay.
Heckling is welcome. I'm cold emailing all of the ecology departments at the Ivy League schools to try to get them to show up to the lecture, just because I think it'd be cool to argue with some Ivy League professors, or discuss,
maybe
various.
Send an invite to K-State agronomy.
Okay. Oh yeah, I'm going to be cold emailing a lot of people. Okay. And the other thing is my book, which is Sorry, I'm having trouble remembering these titles at the moment. Okay, so the book is, as you can imagine, based on the conversation we've had today, the book is called The Grazing Mind. How forgetting about beef brings it back to the table. So, so that should be out probably sometime in the next couple of months. We have some revisions and stuff to go through. So there's no link for that yet. Just sort of be aware of it. It's going to be about 100 pages. Nothing too crazy, but just sort of an initial deep dive into how I have conceived of grazing and the natural world and man's place in the environment in the last 6 years. It's definitely not a here's how often you should move your cows book. It's a here's how we should conceptualize our relationship with reality kind of book. So that'll be out. And other than that, I'm always grateful to be on your show. And it's always fun. I think next time we need to do like a Halloween show, and we both need to do costumes or something.
We'll get together and do one in person. Like I know we keep saying that. We're like, oh, we'll do the next one in person, and we end up right back here on Zoom. But we'll do it. We'll do one. We've got to do one.
Oh, it'll be awesome. Yeah, absolutely, my friend. Okay, well, thank you very much for having me, and I can't wait till next time.
Yeah, I really appreciate your time, and like back to where we started with you having to move. Probably doesn't feel the greatest, but change is an opportunity for growth, and there's always other opportunities in front of you, and I wish you the best of luck, my friend.
Oh, thank you very much. It means a lot, Brian.
All right, man. I'll let you get on with your day. Gang, have a great week. See ya. Hey there. Thanks for making it all the way to the end. I appreciate you. I hate to ask, but since you're already here, to just take a moment to make sure you're following me on social media. You can find me on all social media platforms as Red Hills Rancher. Show some love to the show's supporters listed in the show notes. Leave a review or share this podcast with your friends and networks if it resonated with you. I'll be back next week with another episode to reboot your thinking about farming, ranching, food systems, and the people that operate them. Have a great week, gang. We'll see you.